My brother called it junk and sold it at a Saturday yard sale for $500 cash. By Monday, my boss knew the serial number, my fiancé stopped answering my texts, and a rival firm had booked a celebration dinner. They thought I'd panic because the laptop held $42 million in protected government escrow keys. I didn't panic. I pressed record. My name is Riley Monroe. I'm 32 years old. And on a deceptively bright Saturday morning in the sleepy town of Greyhaven, my life was sold for $500 and a lie. I had driven back to my mother's house, a place steeped in the cloying scent of potpourri and unspoken resentments, to retrieve a work bag I'd left behind the previous evening. The autumn air was crisp, carrying the distant drone of a lawnmower and the rustle of dry leaves skittering across asphalt. A flimsy hand-painted sign that read "Yard Sale" in my mother's cheerful, loopy script was staked into the lawn, its corner flapping in the slight breeze like a distress signal. And there, on a rickety folding table wedged between a grease-stained toaster oven and a stack of warped vinyl records, was my company laptop. It was a matte black, military-grade device, its sleek, angular form, a stark alien artifact amidst the domestic debris. My half-brother, Dylan, stood sentinel beside it, wearing a faded band t-shirt and a smirk that had irritated me since he was 12. He was jingling a thick roll of cash in the pocket of his jeans, the sound a tinny, triumphant rhythm in the quiet morning. "Hey, Riles," he said, his voice slick with false camaraderie. "Just in time. Managed to get $500 for that busted old brick of yours." I stopped. The world seemed to narrow to the space between me and that folding table. The laptop wasn't busted. It wasn't old. It was the linchpin of my entire professional existence. "What did you do, Dylan?" My voice came out flat, devoid of the inferno roaring to life in my chest. He gestured dismissively at the laptop with the roll of bills. "Power supply was shot. Wouldn't even turn on. This guy came by. Said he could use it for parts. Offered $500. Cash. I took it. You should be thanking me." My eyes locked onto the device. I saw the faint, hair-thin scratch across the asset tag, a flaw I knew intimately. Axiom Federal Solutions, GF17. It was there. My gaze flickered to the security screws on the underside of the chassis. The faint, almost invisible smear of clear, tamper-evident paint was still intact. No one had opened it. The power supply wasn't shot. It had been intentionally disabled. A simple trick involving a disconnected internal lead that I used as a physical security measure during transport. It was a dead switch only I knew how to re-engage. A single powerful pulse hammered in the vein behind my right ear. Thump, a drumbeat for a silent declaration of war. I kept my hands loose at my sides. My posture relaxed. Panic is a luxury. It's a tell. "The guy," I said, my tone conversational. "Did you get his name?" Dylan laughed, a short barking sound. "Name? It's a yard sale. Riley. Not an auction at Sotheby's. He paid in cash. Said he was from out of town. Saw a Stone County plate on his truck. That's it." He fanned the bills, a mix of 20s and 50s. $500 for junk. You're welcome." My mother chose that moment to emerge from the house, carrying a box of old china. She saw the tension coiled in the air between us, and her face immediately took on a familiar, weary expression. She refused to meet my gaze, her attention suddenly consumed by arranging a chipped teacup on the table. "Riley, don't be so difficult," she murmured, her voice a placating hum. "Dylan was just trying to help clear things out. If something's broken, you get rid of it. That's all." Broken. The word hung in the air. A deliberate piece of misdirection I knew she was clinging to. She didn't want to know more. She never did. I ignored them both. My hand slid into my pocket, my fingers finding the smooth glass of my phone. With a few taps, I pulled up the Axiom Secure Device Management app. My credentials flowed from muscle memory. A list of assets assigned to my profile appeared. I tapped on GF17. My blood ran cold. Device status: offline. Last connection: 09-14-27. Est. Connection. Duration: 73 seconds. IP address: Masked. VPN. Exit node. Seychelles. It had been turned on. Someone had reconnected the power lead, booted the machine for just over a minute, long enough to verify its contents, to confirm they had the right package, and then shut it down. They were professionals. The use of a VPN out of a non-extradition treaty nation was confirmation. This wasn't some lucky tinkerer from Stone County. This was a targeted acquisition. As I stared at the log, my phone vibrated with an incoming text message. It was from my boss, Director Evans. Bring your device Monday. Routine audit. The timestamp was 09:15:27. Estat. Exactly 60 seconds after my laptop had dropped off the network, the word routine was a lie. There was no such thing as a surprise routine audit in my line of work. It was a message, a threat. They knew. They had the device, and now they were tightening the screws, expecting me to break. A cold, sharp clarity washed over me. The betrayal wasn't just Dylan's casual greed or my mother's willful ignorance. This was a coordinated attack, and my family home had been used as the point of entry. I looked at Dylan, who was still admiring his cash. I looked at my mother, who was now carefully polishing a silver spoon that hadn't been used in a decade. They were collaborators, whether they knew it or not. I pulled my wallet from my back pocket, took out all the cash I had, a little over $600, and methodically separated $500. I walked to the folding table and placed the crisp bills down, neatly squared, right next to the empty space where the laptop had been. The money sat there like a piece of evidence at a crime scene, a memorial. "Thank you," I said, my voice dangerously calm, "for selling my career so cheap." I turned and walked back to my car without another word, the sound of Dylan's confused sputtering fading behind me. I slid into the driver's seat and started the engine, my movements precise and economical. In the rearview mirror, I watched the scene unfold. My mother was finally looking at me, her face a mask of confusion and hurt. Dylan was snatching up the money I'd left, his earlier triumph now curdled with a hint of fear as he added it to his roll. And then I saw it. Parked half a block down, partially obscured by the lush maple tree on the corner, was a black SUV. It was a late-model domestic, the kind favored by federal agents and corporate security teams. It was immaculately clean, anonymous, and all its windows were tinted to an impenetrable, obsidian darkness. It hadn't been there when I arrived. It was just sitting there, engine idling almost silently, waiting, watching, a predator that had already made its kill and was now simply observing the fallout. The black SUV didn't follow. It didn't have to. Its purpose was not pursuit, but confirmation. A silent, stationary testament to a successful operation. I kept my eyes on the road ahead, my hands holding the steering wheel at a steady 10-2. A textbook picture of calm. Inside, a clock had started counting down. I had roughly 48 hours until the curtain rose on Director Evans's routine audit. 48 hours to turn a meticulously planned execution into a resurrection. My mind works in schematics and flowcharts. It's how I survived the abstract world of data security, and it's how I was processing the wreckage in my rearview mirror. To understand the game, you must first understand the board. The board, in this case, is Axiom Federal Solutions. We aren't a household name. We don't build consumer tech. We build the silent, invisible infrastructure that underpins government functions. Specifically, my team and I are the custodians of Project Harborgate, a massive federal initiative to overhaul coastal shipping logistics. I am the head of data security. It's a title that sounds more important than it is, until the day it becomes the only title that matters. And the king on this board? A digital wallet containing $42 million. It isn't liquid cash. It's the performance bond, a colossal sum held in government-backed securities, the financial guarantee that Axiom will deliver on its promises. If that bond is compromised, even just threatened, the Federal Oversight Committee can freeze the project, void our contracts, and launch an investigation that would bankrupt Axiom and blacklist its executives for life. That $42 million isn't a treasure to be stolen. It's a self-destruct button. The button is protected by a multi-signature protocol. It requires two distinct, cryptographically secure keys to authorize any transaction. The first key is mine, generated and held by me alone. The second belongs to an independent, third-party controller, a firm whose entire reputation is built on neutrality. Both keys must be used simultaneously to sign a command, and the physical interface for that signing ceremony, the secure hardware module that validates and executes the command, was embedded deep within the chassis of laptop GF17. My laptop, the one currently in the possession of a ghost from Stone County. No one can drain the funds with just the laptop. They can't. What they can do is attempt to generate a fraudulent command. They can try to make it look like Axiom is behaving recklessly, creating a crisis of confidence, a manufactured emergency. The goal isn't theft, it's sabotage. And that brings me to the opposing player, the one who just made his opening move, Paxton Cade. For the last 3 months, with our CEO recovering from surgery, Paxton has been the acting chief financial officer. He's a man who views the world through the narrow lens of an earnings report, a man who sees security protocols not as essential safeguards, but as expensive, time-consuming obstacles. From the moment he took the temporary chair, he's been pushing, squeezing timelines, slashing budgets for penetration testing, demanding accelerated approvals. His pet project has been bringing in a new, synergistic partner, a consulting firm called Atlas North, to streamline our processes. 3 times in the last quarter, he has formally requested that my team grant temporary security module access to Atlas North's developers. 3 times, I have formally refused, citing federal compliance and basic operational security. The last time was in a full project lead meeting. I laid out the risks, the chain of custody protocols, the immutable logic of the system's design. Paxton had steepled his fingers, a condescending smirk playing on his lips. "Riley," he'd said, his voice oozing with faux patience for the entire room to hear. "Don't you think you're being a little paranoid? They're our partners. We have to build trust." The room had filled with the brittle sound of nervous laughter, the sycophants, the climbers, the people who knew better but valued their bonuses more than their principles. They chuckled along with him. I just stared back at him. "It's not my job to trust, Paxton. It's my job to verify." He had held my gaze for a long moment, his eyes cold and flat, a silent promise of retribution. The first tremor came a week ago. I was working late when I received an automated security alert. My primary network account had been locked due to a password reset request. Time-stamped at 2:13 a.m., I hadn't made the request. I immediately initiated a lockdown and trace. Within minutes, another alert arrived. The ticket was closed. An IT admin I'd never heard of had filed a report. User reported issue. Accidental trigger. Restored credentials from backup. No breach. It was clean. Too clean. It was a probe. A gentle rattle of the doorknob to see if it was locked. That's when I activated the honey tokens. I built a series of seductive, seemingly vulnerable dummy files and access points around the real secure module's command interface. More importantly, I embedded a new layer of steganography into the module's handshake protocol. A digital watermark. Any device attempting to initiate a pre-signing command, even a legitimate one, would have its unique hardware ID, its network address, and a precise timestamp invisibly woven into the cryptographic response. It was a silent alarm, a thread of scarlet silk tied to the trigger. Anyone who touched it would leave their fingerprints, and they would never even know. My exit from the freeway was coming up. I signaled, my movements fluid, automatic. My thoughts were on the night before. Friday. I had left the office late, exhausted after a 14-hour day. The laptop, GF17, was in its hardened transport case, secured with a small, high-security combination padlock I had owned for years. I had stopped at my mother's for a quick dinner, leaving the bag in my car for less than an hour. When I got home, I put the bag in my study, It was only when I went to retrieve a charging cable that I noticed it. The lock. It was the same make, the same model. But it wasn't my lock. The combination was the same. But the tiny scratch near the shackle, the one from when I dropped it on my porch, was gone. It had been swapped. A clean, professional exchange. Someone had accessed the bag. A cold dread had pooled in my stomach. I took out my phone and texted my fiancé. Evan, we'd been together for 2 years, planning a wedding, building a life. He was a consultant, ambitious, driven, always networking. He knew Paxton Cade from some industry mixer. My text was simple, a test. Hey, long day. Left my work bag at my mom's for a bit when I stopped by. Just grabbed it, exhausted. I was giving him an opening, a chance to ask, to show concern, to act normal. His reply came back a few minutes later. 4 words. Sleep well? Not, is everything okay? Not, talk to you in the morning. Not, I love you. Just a dismissal, a closing statement. He knew. He must have known. He knew the bag was there. He had provided the location, the window of opportunity. And so, the pieces clicked into place with sickening precision. The pressure from Paxton, the probe of the 2:13 a.m. reset, the swapped lock, Evan's cold reply, and then the finale. A Saturday morning yard sale, a gullible half-brother with $500 in his hand, and a black SUV watching the curtain fall. This wasn't just corporate espionage. This was a betrayal woven into the very fabric of my life. They hadn't just stolen a piece of hardware. They had taken everything, and they thought I was broken. They thought I would panic. They had 42 million reasons to believe I would. They were wrong. The $42 million isn't a vault waiting to be cracked. It's an anchor. It's the dead weight holding the colossal ship of Project Harborgate steady in the turbulent waters of federal contracting. It provides stability, inspires confidence, and proves our seaworthiness. You don't steal an anchor. You cut the rope. You set the ship adrift in a hurricane, then offer to sell it for salvage. This is the play Paxton Cade is running. He isn't a thief. He's a saboteur. And laptop GF-17 is the knife he intends to use to sever the line. What Paxton, and whoever he has working for him, don't understand is the nature of the rope itself. They see a simple piece of hardware. I designed a living system, a fortress built of logic and memory, with traps laid within traps. The secure module, or SM, housed within GF-17 is more than a simple key interface. It is a purpose-built cryptographic sentinel to execute a signing command for the Harborgate bond. 2 things are required in a sequence so precise it is almost a ritual. First, physical authentication. This comes in the form of a biometric smart card that must be inserted into the laptop's integrated reader. The card contains a cryptographic certificate tied to my unique biological markers. It's the physical key to the first lock. I am the only one with this card, and it is currently in my wallet. Second, and far more critical, is the challenge-response phrase. Once the card is authenticated, the SM's internal chronometer initiates a randomized, time-sensitive challenge. The user then has 90 seconds to provide the correct passphrase. It's not a static password that can be phished or stolen. It's a dynamic key that changes based on the challenge algorithm. But the foundation of that algorithm, the seed from which all correct responses are grown, is a single, immutable string of text. That string is a line of poetry I wrote when I was 12. The gray gull cries for a shore made of glass. It's sentimental, juvenile, and utterly meaningless to anyone else on earth. It was for a school competition. My mother was the only person who read it. I remember her taking a red pen and circling the line, writing good bones in the margin. It is the one secret I believed was truly safe. A key forged in a moment of shared history that no corporate rival could ever guess. The irony that it was her house, her yard sale, that served as the point of breach is a bitter metallic taste in my mouth. They have the laptop, but they don't have my card, and they don't have the ghost of a 12-year-old girl's poetry. They cannot brute force the challenge phrase. The system is designed to recognize such an attack. After 3 failed attempts, The SM does not simply lock down. That would be too simple, too obvious. Instead, it enters what I privately call theatrical mode. In this state, the module appears to function perfectly. It will accept a brute-forced or cleverly manipulated command and will generate a cryptographic signature in response. That signature will pass all of Axiom's internal verification checks to Paxton and his allies at Atlas North. It will look like a complete success. They will see a valid signed command ready to be broadcast to the federal controllers. The digital equivalent of a signed confession to financial malfeasance. They will believe they have their crisis in a box. But it's a forgery, a beautiful, intricate, and utterly damning forgery. The signature is encoded with a subtle flaw, a mathematical anomaly that is invisible to our internal systems, but is designed to be immediately flagged by the public verification network used by the Federal Oversight Committee. The moment that signature is submitted for public audit, it won't just be rejected. It will trigger a high-priority tampering alert, complete with a data packet containing the source network and the exact time of the fraudulent attempt. It's a mousetrap designed to look like a piece of cheese. The signature is the bait, and the public audit is the spring. It's the digital watermark system I implemented after the 2:13 a.m. account probe, now working on a much grander scale. Every command, legitimate or theatrical, is watermarked. The data is hidden in the latency of the cryptographic processor's response times. The tiny, measured delays between computational steps, measured in nanoseconds. A sequence of prime numbers embedded in those delays creates an indelible fingerprint of the session. It's an artist's signature hidden in the brushstrokes. I remember a meeting a month ago. During a quarterly security review, I was explaining the concept of steganographic watermarking to the executive team. Paxton had leaned back in his chair, radiating disdain. "This all sounds very artistic, Riley," he'd said. The word artistic meant as an insult. A little theatrical for a security protocol, don't you think? I had looked him straight in the eye. Artists, Paxton, are masters of hiding things in plain sight, but I don't paint for you. He didn't understand then, and he doesn't understand now. His mind is linear, transactional. He sees the laptop as an object with a single function: control the money. But the $42 million can't be moved. The dual-key protocol with the independent controller ensures that his plan is not to steal the anchor, but to make it look like I was trying to. He wants to generate a fraudulent command, have it traced back to my credentials and my device, and create a 5-alarm fire. In the ensuing panic, with the Harborgate project frozen and Axiom's stock price in freefall, he would emerge as the calm voice of reason. He would propose the one solution that could save the company from federal investigation and total collapse: an emergency acquisition by a stable, reputable partner, a partner like Atlas North. He would sell the smoldering wreckage of the company he sabotaged and call himself a hero. The person who paid Dylan $500 wasn't a treasure hunter. They were an evidence courier. They were sent to procure the weapon that would be used to frame me, the switch that would not only end my career, but bring my company to its knees. They think they have that switch. They believe it is in their hands, ready to be flipped on Monday morning at the routine audit. They have the stage set for my execution. What they don't know is that I built the switch, and I designed it to do more than just turn on a light. I designed it to power a citywide floodlight, to illuminate every dark corner they've been operating in, to burn their shadows away until there is nowhere left for them to hide. The clock is ticking. The initial shock has receded, replaced by a cold, humming current of purpose. They have given me the gift of clarity. They have stripped away the unnecessary variables. A faithless fiancé, a compromised family, a duplicitous boss. All that remains is the board, the pieces, and the 48 hours I have to checkmate a king who doesn't even know he's in the game. I didn't drive home. Home was a compromised space, a stage for a play I had no interest in rehearsing. Instead, I drove downtown, to the multi-level parking garage I used every day for work. The concrete structure was a brutalist cathedral of quiet echoes and the faint smell of gasoline. I bypassed my usual spot and drove to the ground floor attendant's booth. Inside, Lou was reading a worn paperback, his face illuminated by a small desk lamp. Lou had been watching over the cars in this garage for 30 years. He saw everything. He had a memory for faces and license plates that was better than any facial recognition software I'd ever tested. He was also a former military police officer who valued discretion, and a $20 bill slipped into a handshake. I parked and walked to his booth. He looked up, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Riley, burning the midnight oil on a Saturday?" "Something like that." "Lou," I said, leaning against the cool glass, "I need a favor, off the books." He bookmarked his page. "My favorite kind. My mother's street, Greyhaven, corner of Elm and 4th. There's a convenience store on that corner with a camera pointing down Elm. I need the footage from this morning, say between 8 and 10 a.m., specifically, a black SUV, late model. I need a clean shot of the plate." I slid the 20 across the counter. He didn't touch it. "Family trouble?" he asked, his voice low. "The worst kind," I replied. He nodded slowly, his gaze holding mine. "I know a guy who handles their security contract. Give me an hour." He finally picked up the bill and tucked it into his shirt pocket. "I'll text you." I spent the next 45 minutes in a sterile 24-hour coffee shop, nursing a black coffee I had no intention of drinking. My phone was my office. I ran a search through a series of proprietary databases I paid a hefty subscription for, designed for corporate due diligence, the kind that peels back the layers of shell corporations and holding companies. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Lou. A single, clear image of the back of the black SUV, captured as it turned the corner. The license plate was perfectly legible. I typed the plate number into the search field. The result came back in seconds. The vehicle was registered not to an individual, but to a corporation. Clearvale Holdings, LLC, a Delaware corporation, anonymous, by design. I pivoted to the corporate registry database. I typed in Clearvale Holdings. The first layer was what I expected. A registered agent address in Wilmington, no listed officers, a ghost, but I kept digging, cross-referencing incorporation dates, tax filings, and UCC liens. It took another 20 minutes of untangling digital threads, but then I found it. A capital investment filing from 18 months ago. Clearvale Holdings had been the recipient of a 7-figure seed investment from a venture capital fund, and the sole managing partner of that fund was listed on the filing as Atlas North, Paxton's synergistic partner. The knife was now tied directly to the hand that meant to wield it. Next, Evan. I needed to see it for myself. I drove to the Barley Finch, a dimly lit pub with dark wood and the smell of old friendships. It was our place. We'd had our first date there. It's where he'd proposed. I walked in, my eyes scanning the booths. He wasn't there, but the booth in the far back, our booth, had just been cleared. The table was still damp. I saw the server tucking a credit card slip into her apron. "Excuse me," I said, my voice even. "I was supposed to meet my fiancé here. Evan, did you see him?" She gave me a sympathetic look. "Oh, he just left. Him and the other gentleman. They were in a hurry." "Did they close out?" I asked. She pulled the slip from her apron. "Yes, ma'am." Could I see that? I think he might have used our joint card by mistake. It was a flimsy lie, but it was enough. She hesitated, then handed it to me. My breath caught. 2 steak dinners, a bottle of expensive Cabernet. The total was obscene, but it was the signature at the bottom that made my blood freeze. It wasn't Evan's tight, controlled script. It was a bold, arrogant scrawl I saw every day on expense reports and memos. Paxton Cade. I handed the slip back. "Thank you. My mistake." As I walked out into the harsh afternoon light, my phone rang. A blocked number. I answered, pressing the phone to my ear without breaking stride. "Riley." The voice was thin, reedy, instantly recognizable as Paxton's perpetually nervous executive assistant, a man named Marcus. "We know you're upset. Paxton wants to handle this internally. Just return the device on Monday morning. We'll fix the audit. Make this all go away." The sheer audacity of it was breathtaking, the threat wrapped in a paper-thin offer of salvation. A laugh escaped my lips, a short, sharp, humorless sound. An audit you can fix, Marcus? Funny. I was always told they were supposed to be a surprise. I ended the call before he could respond, the silence that followed more satisfying than any argument. I was halfway to my car when my phone buzzed again. Another text from Lou. It was a second image. This one a still frame from a different camera. Likely a doorbell cam across the street from my mother's house. It was grainy, shot from a low angle, but the subject was clear. A man in a crisp polo shirt and slacks was accepting the laptop from Dylan. His face was turned away, but his hand was visible. On his right ring finger was a heavy, gold university ring with a distinctive blue stone. I stood on the sidewalk, oblivious to the people flowing around me, and pulled up a professional networking site on my phone. I typed in Atlas North. I scrolled through the employee list, my eyes scanning the profile pictures, and then I found him, Jason Albright, head of compliance, Atlas North. His profile picture was a grinning, confident corporate headshot. His bio mentioned his pride in his alma mater, Riverton University. I did an image search for a Riverton University class ring. It was a perfect match. The blue stone, the gold setting. They hadn't even bothered to be subtle. This was arrogance. They believed I was already defeated. As if on cue, another message came through. This time, from Evan. The timing was too perfect to be a coincidence. He was part of the cleanup crew. Riley, please don't make a scene. Listen to them. This is a promotion opportunity for you, for us. My fingers flew across the screen. My response a single, cold question. Whose opportunity, Evan? I watched the 3 dots appear and disappear. He was typing, then deleting, thinking, calculating. After a full minute, the dots vanished for good. There was no reply. His silence was the only honest thing he'd offered me all day. I finally got back in my car, the interior feeling like the only secure space left in the world. I sat for a moment, the chain of evidence now a complete, unbreakable circle, the shell company, the signature, the compliance chief, the complicit fiancé, the whole rotten conspiracy laid bare on the glowing screen of my phone. A new email notification popped up. The sender was an encrypted, anonymous address. The subject line was blank. The body of the message contained only 3 lines. The laptop, 27th floor, 9:00 a.m., Monday, or else. The 27th floor. That was Axiom's executive suite, Paxton's office. They wanted me to walk into the lion's den. They wanted to stage the final act on their terms, on their turf, surrounded by their power. They were dictating the terms of my surrender. And for the first time since I'd seen GF-17 sitting next to that rusty toaster oven, a real smile touched my lips. It was a cold, sharp-edged thing, but it was a smile nonetheless. They had just handed me the final piece of my own plan. They want their home turf? Fine. It's always more satisfying to win an away game. The rest of my Saturday was not spent in panic or despair. It was spent in creation. My personal lab. A spare bedroom in my apartment converted into a clean room environment became my command center. It is a place of absolute order, where every tool has its place and every variable is controlled. It was here that I would forge the weapon for Monday morning. I had a ghost in my inventory. A decommissioned, wiped-clean laptop chassis, identical in make and model to GF-17. It was a perk of the job, a shell for testing hardware integrations. Over the next few hours, I performed a meticulous, reverse cosmetic surgery. I referenced a series of high-resolution photos I kept of my own device, replicating every minor sign of wear and tear, a small scuff on the left corner, a faint circular impression on the lid where I often placed my coffee mug, and most importantly, the asset tag. Using a fine-tipped permanent marker and the steady hand of a surgeon, I recreated the thin, hair-thin scratch across Axiom Federal Solutions GF-17. To any casual observer, it was my laptop. But its heart was a lie. I unseated the standard motherboard and installed a custom-built Raspberry Pi controller I had designed for just this sort of contingency. Slotted into it was my own cleanroom copy of the secure module. It was a perfect replica in terms of its interface and cryptographic handshake, but with one critical modification. This SM was programmed to do more than just generate a theatrical, fraudulent signature. It was programmed to sing, with every interaction, every query, every failed or successful authentication attempt. It would embed a unique, cascading watermark into the system logs it generated, a watermark that, when decoded, would read as a simple text string, lupus in fabula, the wolf in the story. It was my signature, a quiet joke for the technicians who would later perform the forensic analysis. With the hardware prepared, I turned to the digital battlefield. I booted up a separate, hardened machine and connected to a secure line. My first act was to draft an email to Axiom's internal legal counsel. I didn't send it from my corporate account. Instead, I used the company's anonymous whistleblower portal, a system I myself had helped design and secure. The message was concise, stripped of all emotion. To the Office of the General Counsel, evidence pertaining to a coordinated effort to sabotage Project Harborgate and manipulate Axiom's market position will be presented on Monday, October 17th, at 9:00 a.m. in the 27th floor primary conference room. The evidence will demonstrate conspiracy to commit wire fraud and breach of federal contract. Your presence is advised. I didn't sign my name. I didn't have to. The meeting invitation from Paxton's assistant, forwarded from an anonymous account, was attached. They would be there. My second communication was a phone call, not a text, not an email, but a voice call to a direct, private number. Cara Linda answered on the second ring. Cara is the lead independent controller for the Harborgate bond, a woman whose integrity is so absolute it has a gravitational pull. Cara, Riley Monroe. Riley. Her voice was warm but professional. This is unexpected. Everything all right? That's a matter of perspective, I said. I'm calling to formally invite you to a security audit meeting tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., Axiom Executive Floor. I've been instructed to present my primary device. I'm requesting your attendance as the project's independent arbiter. I'm also granting you, effective immediately, read-only administrative access to the real-time activity logs for the Harborgate secure module, the one you have in your vault, and the one I have in my possession. There was a short pause. Cara was processing the implications, an audit she hadn't been notified of, a request for live monitoring. Is the bond secure? Riley? She asked, her tone now sharp. All business. The anchor is holding, Cara, but someone is trying to cut the rope. I need a witness with a clean pair of eyes. I'll be there, she said, without another moment's hesitation. And I'll be watching the logs. Next, I dealt with the chain of custody. Lou's evidence was critical, but a jury would see him as an informal source. I drove back to the garage. He was in his booth, the paperback open to a new page. I handed him a single, crisp $1 bill and a pre-printed receipt I had just typed up. He took it, his brow furrowing as he read the simple text. Received, $1 US, $1,000, in consideration for the service of preserving and delivering digital media evidence, time-stamped security footage, on October 15th, 2025. He looked up at me, a slow smile spreading across his face as he understood. I had just made him a paid contractor. I had just made his evidence a legally binding piece of the official record. Chain of custody, he murmured, folding the bill and tucking it carefully into his wallet. You're a piece of work, Riley. I learned from the best. Lou, I said. He signed the receipt, and I countersigned. The foundation was now solid, built on protocol and law. Back in my apartment, I executed the most critical step of the digital trap. I accessed the administrative backend of Axiom's internal communication network. The company used a platform for its quarterly all-hands meetings, a live streaming service that could broadcast to every desktop in the company. It was a tool designed for corporate transparency. I was about to give them more transparency than they had ever bargained for. I wrote a simple script, a few lines of code that acted as a trigger. The source was the guest Wi-Fi network on the 27th floor. The trigger was the connection of any device whose MAC address was registered to Atlas North. The action was simple. Upon connection, the script would immediately activate the audio-visual systems in the main conference room and begin a mandatory, unclosable, full-screen live broadcast to every single employee at Axiom Solutions. They wanted an audit. I was going to give them an audience. The board was set. Now, it was time to invite the players. My email to Paxton Cade was brief. I sent it from my official work account, a model of cheerful compliance. Paxton, regarding Director Evans's request, no problem at all. I'm prepared for the routine audit at 9:00 a.m. tomorrow. Happy to clear up any concerns. Feel free to bring anyone from Atlas North you feel is relevant to the discussion. See you then, Riley. My message to Evan was my last, a simple text. 27th floor, 9 a.m., if you want to hear the truth. No emotion, no accusation, just an invitation, a final chance to choose a side. My final preparation was a physical one. I took a standard bottle of water, the kind that littered every conference room in our building. Using a small tool, I carefully separated the inner cap from the outer security ring. In the hollow space of the cap, I placed a microbug, an audio recorder no larger than a grain of rice. Its battery life was 12 hours, more than enough. I snapped the cap back together. It was a trick I had seen Paxton himself use once, leaving his forgotten water bottle behind after a contentious negotiation. He taught me to never trust the room, and I was a very good student. That night, I didn't sleep much. In the quiet, dark hours before dawn, I found myself thinking about that line of poetry from my childhood. The gray gull cries for a shore made of glass. I remembered my mother's red pen, the warmth of her approval in those two words. Good bones. It was a foundation, a structure, something that could not be easily broken. Paxton, Evan, even my own family. They had all mistaken my quiet nature for weakness. They thought I was pliable, that I would fracture under pressure. They had forgotten that a shore made of glass is beautiful, but it's also sharp. It reflects the light, and it cuts you to the bone if you try to crush it. They were about to find out just how good my bones were. The elevator ride to the 27th floor was silent. I watched the numbers climb, my reflection a calm, impassive ghost in the polished steel doors. I could feel the faint vibration of the cables through the soles of my shoes, a humming tension that mirrored the frequency in my own nerves. My breathing was even, a slow, metered rhythm. Inhale, hold, exhale. The key to any high-stakes operation is respiratory control. Panic is a function of oxygen deprivation to the brain. I was not deprived. I was perfectly supplied. The doors opened with a soft chime, revealing the executive floor. It was a space designed to intimidate, all cool marble, smoked glass, and hushed, recycled air. The panoramic windows displayed the city below like a circuit board, a sprawling map of power and connection. I walked the length of the hallway, my heels clicking with a sharp, deliberate report on the stone floor, the only sound in a cathedral of silence. I arrived at the main conference room at precisely 8:57 a.m. The door was glass. I could see them inside, arranged around the massive mahogany table like figures in a diorama. Paxton Cade sat at the head, a king on a temporary throne, flanked by his nervous assistant, Marcus. To his right were two men I didn't recognize, but whose crisp, off-the-rack suits and predatory stillness screamed corporate security. One of them wore a heavy gold ring with a blue stone. Jason Albright, head of compliance, Atlas North. The man from Lou's photo, Clearvale Holdings in the flesh. And at the far end of the table, isolated, sat Evan, my fiancé. He was staring down at his hands, his shoulders hunched. He looked smaller in that chair, diminished. He felt my presence before he saw me and his head jerked up. His eyes, when they met mine, were wide with a desperate, pleading panic. He looked away instantly. Unable to hold my gaze, he had made his choice. I pushed the heavy glass door open and stepped inside. The door closed behind me with a soft, hydraulic hiss, sealing us in. Paxton smiled. A thin, predatory slash. It didn't reach his eyes. His eyes were flat, like a shark's. "Riley," he began, his voice a smooth, condescending purr. He didn't ask me to sit. He wanted me to stand, to be the subject under examination. "Thank you for coming. We have a situation, a serious one. It appears there has been a significant violation of company protocol regarding a secure asset assigned to you, but we're here to help you fix it. We want to contain this before it gets out of hand." He gestured to the empty space on the table in front of him. A silent command. I said nothing. I walked to the table, unslung the laptop bag from my shoulder, and placed it down. The sound was a soft thud that seemed to echo in the tense silence. I unzipped the bag and slid the ghost of GF-17 onto the polished mahogany. My ghost. I carefully plugged the power cord into the table's integrated port. The small charging light blinked on. I pressed the power button. The machine whirred to life, and the screen flickered on, not with the standard Axiom corporate splash screen, but with a low-level BIOS debug menu, a screen that would only appear if the machine's core boot sequence had been interrupted or tampered with. It was exactly what someone who had manually reconnected a power lead and performed a hasty diagnostic would expect to see. It was a confirmation of their success. Jason Albright, the compliance chief from Atlas, leaned forward. His voice was calm, authoritative, the voice of a man used to conducting interrogations. "Ms. Monroe, for the purposes of this audit, we'll need to run a simple verification command on the secure module, just to confirm its integrity." This was the moment, the precipice. I could feel every heartbeat in my throat. I looked across the room, my eyes finding Carolinda, who had been sitting silently in a chair against the wall, an official observer. She was holding a tablet, her expression neutral. I gave her the slightest of nods, a flicker of acknowledgement so small only someone watching for it would see it. In response, her thumb brushed the side of her tablet, and I knew a digital stopwatch had just started. The official audit was now in session, and the logs were live. I turned my attention back to Albright. "Be my guest," I said, my voice a placid C. I stepped back from the table, giving him a clear field. He produced a small USB drive from his pocket and inserted it into the laptop. He began typing, his fingers moving with practiced speed across the keyboard. He was running a script designed to initiate the handshake with the SM, to force a signature, to create the evidence they needed. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Paxton lean towards his assistant. His voice was a low, urgent whisper, but in the sterile acoustics of the room, I heard it clearly. I knew the micro recorder in my water bottle, sitting innocently on the credenza behind him, was hearing it even better. "Hurry it up, Jason, let's get this done." The script on the screen finished. A single line of text appeared. "Signature hash generated, verification pending." Albright sat back, a look of smug satisfaction on his face. My ghost machine had performed flawlessly. It had accepted their command and returned a signature that, to their internal checks, would appear perfectly valid, and I knew that signature was now irrevocably, invisibly watermarked with the digital fingerprint of their presence here. A thread of scarlet silk tied to the MAC address of the Atlas North Guest network he was logged into. 14 seconds had passed since he began typing. Evan, from the end of the table, was practically vibrating with anxiety. He looked at me, his face pale, his eyes begging. "Riley," he whispered, the sound barely audible. "Stop, please." I met his gaze, my expression unreadable. "They're doing this to themselves, Evan," I replied, my voice just as quiet, but carrying the cold weight of a final judgment. Paxton didn't hear us. He was beaming, a triumphant, wolfish grin spreading across his face. He had won. He had the weapon, the witness, the narrative. He had my career, my company, my life, all packaged neatly in a forged cryptographic signature. He opened his mouth, ready to deliver the killing blow, to formally announce my suspension, my ruin. His moment of victory lasted for exactly one more second. It was cut short by a soft, electronic chime that emanated from the large presentation screen mounted on the wall. It was a system alert, a sound no one in the room had heard before. Every head swiveled towards the screen as a simple, text-based notification box appeared over the tranquil corporate screensaver. The words were stark, black on white, and utterly terrifying to the men who thought they were in control. External access detected. Initiating mandatory all-hands broadcast. The notification on the screen hung in the air for a full 3 seconds of perfect, crystalline silence. The words, "Initiating mandatory all-hands broadcast," were an epitaph for the plan Paxton had so carefully constructed. The small, red live indicator in the top right corner of the screen began to blink, a single, malevolent eye opening to the world. A low, confused murmur started among Paxton's men. Albright's professional mask twitched, the first sign of a crack. Paxton stared at the screen, his mind clearly struggling to process this impossible turn of events. He thought this room was his fortress. I had just turned it into a global stage. In that moment of stunned silence, a vibration came from the pocket of my slacks, my phone. I slid it out, my movements calm and deliberate. The screen was lit with a message preview from Dylan, my half-brother. The timing was almost poetic. Attached to the message was an image. I tapped it open. It was a screenshot of a bank transfer confirmation. $10,000. The transfer was from a source listed as CV Consulting, a barely veiled pseudonym for Clearvale Holdings. The memo line of the transfer contained just 2 words: estate assistance. The payoff for his part in the yard sale, the price of his betrayal. My fingers moved with practiced ease. I tapped the share icon, then the airdrop button. A list of available devices appeared. At the top of the list, Confroom 27 main display. I selected it. On the massive screen at the end of the room, the corporate logo and the blinking red live indicator were instantly replaced by the screenshot from my phone. The image was huge, every detail rendered with perfect, damning clarity. The $10,000 figure, the CV Consulting sender name, the memo. I let the image hang there for a moment, letting the weight of it settle into the room and into the hundreds of offices and cubicles where every Axiom employee was now a captive audience. Then, I spoke. My voice was not loud, but it cut through the shocked silence like a shard of glass. "This," I said, gesturing to the screen, "is why a broken mission-critical laptop containing the keys to a $42 million federal bond found its way out of my mother's house for $500 in cash. This is the down payment for corporate sabotage." Paxton's face, which had been pale with confusion, was now flushing a deep, mottled red with rage. But before he could speak, a new drama unfolded at the glass door of the conference room. A woman's frantic face appeared, pressed against the pane. My mother. Her hair was a mess, her face streaked with tears. She was pulling at the door handle, but it wouldn't budge. A uniformed security guard stood calmly on the other side, his hand resting on her arm, preventing her from entering. Her voice was a muffled, desperate wail through the thick glass. "Riley, they told me it was just for clearing out the house. He said he was a cousin. I didn't know, baby. I swear I didn't know." The sight of her was a sharp, unexpected blow, a surge of messy, familial pain in the middle of a sterile corporate execution. Paxton and his men stared, momentarily distracted by this bizarre new development. The perfect, controlled audit was devolving into a circus, my circus. I turned away from her, hardening my heart. Her panic was real, her ignorance likely genuine, but her willful blindness had still made her a tool. I would deal with her later. Now, I had another traitor to address. I turned my gaze to the far end of the table, to the man who was trying to make himself invisible. "Evan," I said. My voice was quiet, but it seemed to thunder in the room. He flinched, but refused to look at me. Dylan's price was $10,000. What was yours? Silence. He just stared at the polished mahogany, his knuckles white where he gripped the edge of the table. He was a statue of guilt. No answer? I asked softly. All right. I turned my attention back to my phone. I closed the image and opened my email. I typed a single name into the search bar. Albright. One result appeared. An email from the day before, sent to my personal account, automatically filtered into my spam folder. The sender was Jason Albright, head of compliance at Atlas North. The subject, offer of employment, confidential. I opened it. It was a formal job offer for a senior vice president position at Atlas North. The salary was double my current one. The start date was November 1st, and at the bottom of the draft contract, under the section titled Contingencies, was a single, typed line. Offer conditional on the successful acquisition and transfer of Axiom Federal Solutions assets. Conditional on the device. Once again, my thumb found the share button. I airdropped the entire email, with the key line highlighted in yellow, to the main display. The screenshot of the bank transfer was replaced by the letterhead of Atlas North, by the exorbitant salary, by Evan's name, by the single line that proved his complicity beyond any doubt. The entire company could now see the price of his betrayal. It was a title and a bigger paycheck. That's enough, Paxton roared, slamming his hand on the table. The sound was a cannon shot in the tense room. He was losing control completely. The mask of the calm, calculating CFO had been burned away, revealing the furious, cornered animal beneath. I turned to face him, my expression serene. I agree, Paxton, I said. My voice as calm as his was furious. It is enough, more than enough for an audit. As if on cue, a new voice joined the conversation. It was Carolinda, the independent controller, who had been a silent observer until now. She stood up, holding her tablet. Her voice was steady, professional, and carried the absolute weight of impartial authority. I can confirm, she said, addressing the room, but also the live camera, that at 09:04 a.m. this morning, an attempt was made to generate a pre-signing command for the Harborgate bond from this device. She gestured to my ghost laptop. The attempt was initiated from a temporary user account logged into Axiom's guest network. The watermarks embedded in the module's response logs definitively identify the source device's hardware ID and the network address. They are a perfect match for the credentials assigned to Atlas North's compliance division for their visit today. She paused, letting the technical confirmation sink in. The generated signature was a theatrical forgery, designed to fail public verification. The attempt was logged, watermarked, and constitutes a material breach of the security protocols governing the $42 million bond. It was checkmate. The legal, technical, and now personal evidence was all on the table, broadcast for the entire world to see. I walked to the glass door. My mother was still there, sobbing, held back by the impassive guard. I looked at her, not with anger, but with a profound, weary sadness. For a brief, fleeting moment, I pitied her. She was a pawn, and she would suffer for it. But she was not the player. I raised a hand and placed it on the glass, opposite hers. Go home, Mom, I said, my voice soft enough that only she could hear. I'll handle the rest. Just go home. She stared at me, her eyes wide with a mixture of terror and relief. She nodded, a jerky, spastic movement, and allowed the guard to lead her away down the hall. In that moment, I forgave her, but I had no forgiveness left for the men in this room. Paxton, seeing his last shred of control evaporating, lunged for the intercom phone on the table. "Security!" he yelled into the receiver. "Get to the 27th floor conference room now. Remove this woman." The response came not from the phone, but from the doorway. The guard who had escorted my mother away had returned, and he was not alone. Another guard stood with him. He didn't look at me. He looked directly at Paxton. "Sir," the guard said, his voice firm and unwavering, "our instructions are from the Office of the General Counsel. We've been ordered to secure this room and to act under the direction of the independent federal controller until they arrive. Our orders are to ensure that no one leaves. The security guard's words sucked the last of the air from the room. Paxton's authority, which had filled this space just moments before, collapsed into a vacuum. He looked from the guards to me, his face a canvas of dawning horror. The hunter was now caged with his prey, and the prey was baring its teeth. This was the endgame, the final move. I raised my phone, the screen still glowing. On it was a simple, custom-coded interface I had built for this very purpose. It consisted of a single, large, red button on a black background. The label above it read, Public Verify. It was a dead man's switch, a button that would take the beautiful theatrical signature generated by Albright and broadcast it directly to the Harbor Gate Project's public verification servers, the ultimate, impartial judge. It was one thing for Kara to confirm the anomaly. It was another for the federal government's own automated systems to scream it from the rooftops. I pressed the button. My phone sent a single, encrypted packet of data. The payload was the signature hash from my ghost laptop. For a few seconds, nothing happened. The only sound was the hum of the HVAC system and Paxton's ragged breathing. Then, the main presentation screen, which was still showing Evan's job offer, flickered. The image was replaced by a stark, command line interface, a direct feed from the public verification server. A new line of text appeared, typed out character by character, as if by an invisible hand. Verifying signature hash, 7A3B, 9F4. Cross-referencing with Axiom, secure module ledger. Checking against independent controller timestamp. Result, anomaly. Signature is synthetic. Flagged for manual review. Tampering indicated. The words hung there, a final, digital verdict. Tampering indicated. It wasn't just an error, it was an accusation, rendered in the cold, irrefutable language of machines. And it was a trigger. The moment the server returned its result, another automated script on my private server executed. A pre-drafted email, containing everything, was sent. It contained the full audio recording from the water bottle, the complete, unedited video feed from the conference room camera, a copy of the server logs from Kara's tablet showing the Atlas North network activity, the screenshot of Dylan's $10,000 payoff, the text of Evan's job offer, and a full forensic breakdown of the watermarks. The recipient's list was short and brutal. The head of the Federal Compliance Division for the Department of Transportation and the personal, encrypted inbox of Axiom's lead counsel. The dominoes were not just falling, they were cascading. Paxton's face had drained of all color. The furious red had been replaced by a waxy, sickly white. He finally understood. This wasn't an audit I had stumbled through. This was an ambush I had orchestrated. "You," he hissed, his voice a venomous rasp. He pointed a trembling finger at me. "You've destroyed this company. You've ruined us." I met his gaze, my own calm and unyielding. The 48 hours of pressure, of betrayal, of cold fury, had been compressed into a single, diamond-hard point of clarity. "You sold the company, Paxton," I said, my voice quiet but carrying to every corner of the room. "I just made sure you didn't get away with the money." As the last word left my lips, the heavy glass door to the conference room swung open. But this time, it wasn't my mother, or a single security guard. It was a delegation, 2 men and a woman in dark, severe suits that were the unmistakable uniform of federal investigators, and walking beside them, his face grim, his eyes burning with a cold fire I had not seen in months, was Howard Royce, the actual, non-acting, and now apparently fully recovered CEO of Axiom Federal Solutions. Kara had made the call the moment she started her audit clock. She hadn't just come to witness. She had come to arbitrate a surrender. Royce's eyes swept the room, taking in the scene with the speed of a veteran executive. He saw Paxton, pale and cornered. He saw the men from Atlas, frozen in their chairs. He saw Evan, a ghost at the end of the table. He saw me, standing alone. And then he saw the main screen, the damning verdict from the federal server, and the small, blinking red live indicator. His gaze snapped to the camera mounted on the wall. "Kill that stream," he ordered, his voice a low, powerful growl. "Now." "No," I said. The word was quiet, but absolute. Royce's head turned, his eyes locking on me. He wasn't used to being defied. "They deserve to know," I continued, gesturing vaguely towards the camera. "All of them. The employees you were about to sell down the river. They deserve to see who was holding the knife." For a long moment, Royce and I were locked in a silent battle of wills. He was the CEO. I was the subordinate. But in this room, at this moment, I held the power. He gave a short, sharp nod. A concession. The stream would continue. A chair scraped against the floor. Evan was on his feet, his face a wreck of tears and desperation. "Riley," he choked out. "I'm sorry. He told me. They said it was for—" I didn't look at him. I didn't acknowledge his existence. I simply turned my head a few degrees away, presenting him with my shoulder. He was a ghost, a piece of static. His apology was a currency that no longer had any value. He trailed off into a choked sob, the sound pathetic and hollow. The shift in the room was palpable. The investigators began to move, their actions economical and precise. It was then that Jason Albright, the Atlas compliance chief, made his final, foolish move. His hand snaked out, reaching for the ghost laptop, his fingers closing around the USB drive he had inserted. He thought he could erase the evidence. "I wouldn't do that," a calm voice said from the doorway. "Lou," he was standing just inside the room, his phone held up, camera forward. Kara had obviously invited him to join her as an official witness when she called Royce. He had been waiting. The flash from his phone's camera was a small, brilliant star in the dim room, perfectly capturing the image of Albright's hand on the USB drive. An active attempt to tamper with evidence in the presence of federal investigators. "That device is now evidence, Mr. Albright," Kara said. Stepping forward, she held out a static-proof evidence bag. "Place the drive in the bag, now." Albright's hand recoiled from the laptop as if it were red-hot. Defeated, he dropped the USB drive into her bag. It was too much for Paxton. His survival instinct, primal and stupid, took over. He shoved his chair back and made a break for the door. It was a desperate, clumsy sprint. He didn't get 2 steps. The 2 security guards, who had been standing impassively by the door, moved with a fluid, practiced grace. They didn't tackle him. They simply stepped into his path. 2 immovable objects. Paxton crashed into them and bounced back. And then came the sound. A sound that is unmistakable, a short, metallic rasp, followed by a series of sharp, clean clicks, the sound of a ratchet tightening, the sound of hardened steel closing around a wrist. It was the sound of handcuffs being secured, the final punctuating beat in the collapse of Paxton Cade's world. The entire room, and the hundreds of employees watching on their screens, heard that single, quiet, damning sound. The audit was over. The sound of the handcuffs was a full stop. It was the end of a sentence, the end of a chapter, the end of an era of casual corruption that had festered in the quiet halls of the 27th floor. The immediate aftermath was not chaos. It was a strange, hyper-efficient ballet of procedure. The federal investigators, who had introduced themselves with the quiet authority of undertakers, separated the players. Paxton was led to a corner, his face a mask of disbelief. Albright and his associate were told not to touch anything, their hands placed flat on the table. Evan was simply ignored, a piece of furniture in the wreckage of his own making, sobbing quietly into his hands. The clock on the main screen, visible to the entire company, became my anchor. It was the only objective truth left in the room. 09:37 a.m. CEO Howard Royce, now in full command, stood in the center of the room. He did not look at the investigators or the disgraced executives. He looked directly into the camera, at the thousands of employees watching this unprecedented corporate meltdown. His voice was a low, resonant baritone, filled with the cold fury of a king whose castle had been breached. "Effective immediately," Royce declared. his words precise and final. Paxton Cade is suspended from all duties at Axiom Federal Solutions, pending the results of a federal investigation he is to fully cooperate with. He then turned his head slightly, his gaze falling on Albright. All pending and future negotiations, partnerships, and discussions with the entity known as Atlas North are hereby terminated. Our legal counsel will be activating Shareholder Rights Plan 3B. A quiet gasp went through the room. 3B, the poison pill. It was the nuclear option, a defensive measure that would make a hostile takeover of Axiom prohibitively expensive, flooding the market with new shares and diluting the holdings of any potential acquirer. It wasn't just a cancellation of a deal, it was a declaration of war against Atlas North. Royce was burning the bridge and salting the earth behind it. He was choosing the company over the conspirators, and he was doing it live, for everyone to see. 9:41 a.m. My corporate-issued phone buzzed on the table where I'd left it. I glanced down. It was a company-wide email notification. The subject line was simple. An important message regarding Project Harborgate. The sender was Howard Royce. I tapped it open. The message was short, devoid of the usual corporate jargon. To all Axiom employees, as many of you have just witnessed, a serious breach of security and ethics was attempted against this company and against a critical federal project. The threat was neutralized thanks to the integrity, foresight, and courage of one of our own. On behalf of the board and the entire executive team, I want to extend our profound gratitude to Riley Monroe, Head of Data Security, for safeguarding not only Project Harborgate, but the very principles this company stands for. My name, in print, not as a suspect, but as a shield. I watched as replies began to pour into the thread from colleagues, project managers, even people I barely knew from other departments. Thank you, Riley. Incredible. Glad you're on our side. The digital tide had turned. The whispers Paxton had cultivated, the reputation of me being paranoid and difficult, were being washed away in a flood of public vindication. 09:45 a.m. My personal phone vibrated, a text from a number I now looked at with a sense of profound distance. Evan. It was his last, pathetic attempt to rewrite the history we had all just witnessed. I was tricked. He said it was a sure thing, that you'd be promoted. I did it for us. I read the words and felt nothing, not anger, not sadness, just a vast, hollow emptiness where a future used to be. The lie was so pathetic, so transparent. For us, he had sold our future for a conditional job offer, and now he was trying to sell me a fantasy of his noble intentions. My thumbs moved over the screen. My reply short, sharp, and surgically precise, a single sentence to sever the last, rotting thread that connected us. You made a choice. I sent the message. I did not wait for a reply. I blocked his number, and then I deleted his contact entirely. His name, his number, his digital ghost, erased with a press of a button. 09:52 a.m. One of Axiom's internal lawyers, a woman I respected named Anya Sharma, approached me. She had been conferring with the investigators and with Kara. She gave me a small, weary smile. The feds have already been in touch with the DOT, she said quietly. The public server flagged the synthetic signature exactly as you designed. They've placed a temporary hold on the project as a formality, but they've confirmed the bond itself was never at risk. There will be no freeze, no contract void. You saved it. Riley, clean kill. The anchor was secure. The ship was safe. The storm had passed. I nodded, a wave of exhaustion washing over me for the first time. The adrenaline that had sustained me for 2 days was finally beginning to recede. 10:03 a.m. My phone rang. The screen displayed a picture of my half-brother, Dylan, grinning foolishly at some long-forgotten family barbecue. I almost declined the call, but a cold sense of duty made me answer. Riley? His voice was a panicked, tearful squeak. Riley, that company, the guy from the yard sale, they just called me. They're lawyers. They said I was an accessory to fraud. They said they're going to sue me, that I have to give the money back. What do I do? the whining, the complete lack of responsibility. It was so utterly Dylan. I felt no sympathy, only a cold, detached pity. "Did you keep the receipt for the $10,000 transfer?" I asked, my voice flat. "What? Yes, I think so." "Good," I said. "Give it to a lawyer. Tell them the truth. That's all the advice I have for you." I ended the call before he could reply. The sound of his weeping cut short. 10:10 a.m. A new text message. From my mother. The words were simple, steeped in a lifetime of regret and things left unsaid. "I am so sorry, baby." I stared at the message. Forgiveness was too complicated a thing to address in that moment. Forgiveness required energy I did not have. Instead, I scrolled through the emojis, found the simple, red heart, and sent it without a word. It was an acknowledgement, not an absolution, an ending, not a new beginning. Then, I went into her contact settings and muted her notifications. I needed silence. 10:15 a.m. Carolindi approached the table where the ghost laptop still sat. She placed her tablet down. On the screen was a formal, time-stamped report of the morning's events. It detailed the network logs, the watermark analysis, the exact moment the theatrical signature had been generated. It was the official, legal record of the crime. She signed the bottom of the document with a stylus, her signature a sharp, elegant script. "It's all here, Riley," she said, looking at me with a newfound respect. "The digital evidence is a perfect, unbroken chain. Legally, it's airtight. They're done." She then looked over at Lou, who was giving his statement to one of the investigators. "Your chain of custody was flawless. By the way, you taught a lot of lawyers a lesson today." 10:19 a.m. Howard Royce finally gave the nod. "All right, end the broadcast." An IT technician, who had been waiting nervously by the door, scurried in and killed the feed. The last image that every employee at Axiom saw was a close-up, a shot from the main camera focused on the mahogany table. It was an image of my hand, reaching out, unplugging my ghost laptop. My hand then gently placed the machine back into its simple canvas bag. The wolf was being put away. The story was over. 10:22 a.m. The investigators were preparing to escort Paxton and the Atlas team from the building. The room was beginning to clear. I walked over to Howard Royce, who was now standing by the panoramic window, looking down at the city. I pulled a folded piece of paper from my pocket. It was my letter of resignation, which I had printed and signed before leaving my apartment that morning. I held it out to him. "Howard," he turned, saw the letter, and his face fell. "Riley, no, don't. Whatever you want. A new title, a raise, name it." "It's not about that," I said. "Axiom needs a clean slate, and so do I. I can't stay." I pushed the letter into his hand. "I have one condition, though." He looked at me, his eyes questioning. "I want the company to fund a full 4-year cybersecurity scholarship at the State University, a perpetual grant. I want it named the Lou Kowalski Endowment for Digital Integrity." I glanced over at Lou, who was just finishing his statement. He had no idea what I was doing. "I want a decent man who watches over things to be the name people remember from this. Not Paxton, not me, him." 10:30 a.m. Howard Royce looked at the letter in his hand, then at me. He saw the resolve in my eyes, the knowledge that I could not be bought or persuaded. He knew this was the price of my silence and my departure. He slowly folded the letter and tucked it into his jacket pocket. He nodded, a look of profound, weary respect on his face. "We owe you a great deal more than that, Riley, but it's a start. Consider it done." I walked out of the elevator and into the quiet, concrete stillness of the parking garage. The air was cool and damp. Outside, a fine mist had begun to fall, a gentle, cleansing drizzle that beaded on the windows and softened the hard edges of the city. The storm had broken, and this was the aftermath. I walked to my car. the canvas bag containing the ghost of GF-17 feeling impossibly light on my shoulder. I opened the trunk and placed the laptop inside, laying it carefully on the spare tire cover. It wasn't a trophy, it was a prop, its role in the play now finished. Its authentic twin, the real GF-17, was already catalogued and sealed in an evidence vault under Cara Linda's careful watch, its secrets and its power once again inert and secure. I closed the trunk, the sound a solid, final thud in the quiet garage. "Riley," the voice cut through the quiet hiss of the rain on the pavement. It was broken, desperate. I turned. Evan was standing 20 feet away, halfway between the elevator and my car. He looked wrecked, his suit rumpled, his face pale and tear-streaked. He looked like a man who had just watched his entire life burn to the ground, because he took a hesitant step forward. "Riley, please, just let me explain." I didn't say a word. I simply looked at him, my expression a blank wall he could not scale. I walked to the driver's side door, opened it, and slid into the seat. The familiar scent of the car's interior was a small, comforting anchor in a world that had been set adrift. I pulled the heavy door shut, the sound a definitive, metallic click that echoed his own name back at him. I started the engine. He ran to the window, his hand resting on the glass, his face contorted in a mask of pathetic desperation. "Don't do this," he pleaded, his voice muffled by the window. I pressed the button to lower the window. It slid down, but only a few inches, just enough to create a small gap between his world and mine. "Don't call me again, Evan," I said. My voice was not angry. It was not sad. It was simply a statement of fact, as calm and final as a line of code. I pressed the button again, and the glass slid silently upwards, sealing him out for good. He stood there for a moment, his hand still on the rising window, before letting it fall to his side, defeated. I put the car in reverse. As I backed out of the space, my personal phone, lying on the passenger seat, buzzed. I glanced at the screen. It was a push notification from a national news outlet. The headline was stark and to the point. Axiom CFO Paxton Cade arrested in corporate espionage probe. Federal investigation launched into Atlas North. The first wave, the consequences were already rippling outwards, moving at the speed of light. I put the car in drive and pulled away, not looking back at the man who was now just a small, broken figure in my rearview mirror. As I drove towards the exit of the garage, I glanced up at that same mirror, at my own reflection. I had expected to see a stranger, a woman hardened by betrayal and battle, but the face that looked back at me was not hard. It was still. The tension that had lived behind my eyes for months was gone. The faint lines of stress around my mouth had softened. It was the face of a soldier after a long, brutal war. A face that had forgotten what peace looked like, but was now, slowly, beginning to remember. It was strangely calm. I stopped at the garage exit, waiting for the traffic to clear. I picked up my phone. There was one last task to perform, one final thread to sever. I opened the Axiom Secure Device Management app one last time. My administrative privileges were still active. I navigated to my own credentials, my own access rights to the HarborGate Secure module. I scrolled down to the bottom of the page, to the command that only a Level 1 administrator could issue. The command was simple: revoke and permanently delete user credentials. I pressed the button. A confirmation box appeared. "This action is irreversible. Are you sure you wish to proceed?" I pressed yes. There was a soft, whirring icon for a moment, and then it was done. My access was gone. The biometric key on my smart card was now just a piece of plastic. The challenge response phrase, the line of poetry from a 12-year-old girl that had served as the ultimate key, the secret that had saved everything, was now useless. It no longer unlocked anything. It had been erased from the system. Its power returned to what it had always been, just a memory. The gray gull cries for a shore made of glass. It vanished into the ether, unrecorded, unsaved. The $42 million slept soundly in its digital vault. Project HarborGate was alive and well, Axiom Federal Solutions was secure. My story within its walls was over. There was nothing left to save. My thumbs moved over the screen. A new message, to a contact list that was now significantly shorter and more carefully curated. It was a text to Lou. "Lunch today?" The reply came back in less than a minute. "My treat." I smiled. A small, genuine smile. I pulled out into the light. Steady rain, merging into the afternoon traffic. The camera of my mind's eye pulled back, rising up from my car, up past the concrete levels of the garage, up to the 27th floor of the Axiom Tower. It looked through the panoramic windows of the conference room, now empty except for a cleaning crew. Then it panned down, to the street below, where a black sedan was pulling away from the curb, and in the back seat, a man in a rumpled suit stared out the window, his hands cuffed behind his back. The camera continued to pull back, the car getting smaller, the massive glass building shrinking, the city itself becoming a map, a memory. The screen went black. The end. Thank you all so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. So drop a comment below and let's connect and share our thoughts on the story. If you enjoyed this, please consider subscribing to the channel and giving this video a like. And if you want to help this story be heard by more people, please hit that hype button to show your support.